Hello, everyone, and welcome to One Control Report Podcast, episode 187. I'm Benjamin Yoder, here today to talk to you about video games in this year of 2021. And man, have I played a video game since 2021, basically. So if you don't know, on Thursday we had a stream that was like a Super Smash Brothers stream that we just kind of played Smash Brothers together in the chat and everything. I had a good time. My wrist, man, it like, I don't know. I think it's something to do with the GameCube triggers these days. They're just too much on these old wrists when you're playing a game like Smash Brothers where you're rapidly tapping it. I really need to like use the L trigger more than anything and see if that helps. But that's like relearning the muscle memory of, using your right index finger for shielding and grabbing. So yeah, that was fun. I had a good time. We had some lag issues. I don't really know where they are coming from. It's one of those things that like there's enough people involved, and obviously I'm streaming. Like it's like I don't know if this is a me issue or if it's an issue with other players on the other side. But some of those matches got real rough at times. So yeah, I'm not sure. Maybe it's something that we would do off stream in the future. Just I had mentioned in the past maybe opening up a Discord. That might be a good excuse wise if people want to play games together and stuff, and we can do something that's more organized that way. I think that would make more sense than probably a stream, to be honest. It would reduce the bandwidth or the strain on my bandwidth from streaming it and also recording it or also playing online, especially since this week we did Smash Brothers for Wii U and Smash Brothers Ultimate, so I had two Smash Brothers games running at the same time. They weren't like playing games at the same time for the most part, so I don't think there was that that much data going across, but it was interesting because like the stream wasn't dropping frames at all. So I would expect if I was having like lag spikes, the stream would drop frames, but I don't know. Anyways, so yeah, maybe we'll think about that again in the future, but maybe we'll consider it as something that we do separately from streaming. I think that probably makes the most sense. But yeah, we'll see. Anyways, though, what I literally all I've done since even before that stream on Thursday, but after that stream, is play Xenoblade Chronicles X. I put over 30 hours into Xenoblade Chronicles X Thursday, Friday, Saturday. I have not played any today, which is Sunday, which I'm recording this. I will probably put a little bit of time into it today, but yeah, I just went hard on Xenoblade Chronicles X. And the reason why is because during the last week, I had to record all those videos I put up, throughout the week. And, as they were definitely quick and fast content to put up. And, I a lot of these things, I always worry about the length. I'm like, this is like a 40-minute video of me talking about what I want to do with the website. But, I don't know. It's not a big deal. It's not like that's going to be an ongoing thing. It's like at the end of the year, every year, I'll reconsider how I approach it next year, but I just need to get something out, right? But after, doing that Japan stream, I streamed the week before that doing the Silvery Peak, or the Thursday before that doing the Silvery Peak thing. And then I had to record the podcast and the 3 additional videos. I was just done by the end of that. I was just like, man, I don't want to hear myself speak ever again. And I kind of don't want to do this podcast right now, honestly. I'm still a little tired, but weekly podcast, we're doing it. So I was super burned out by that, and basically I didn't get a Christmas break because I spent most of that Christmas break editing that stuff. So I really decided this week that I wouldn't really work on anything other than this podcast, and so I didn't do any kind of editing work. I tried not to play new games or think about games. So I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do during the break, and really I think the answer is either watch a bunch of anime or play a video game that I know I don't need to talk about anytime soon. So I was like, well, I really was disappointed by my progress in Xenoblade Chronicles X this year, so let's focus on that. And was not expecting to put like 35 hours into it, but sure enough, I did. And we made a lot of progress, and it really, I'm at the point where I see the end of the road. Basically, I'm on the final story chapter of the game. I tried to beat it just to see if I could hit the credits, but unfortunately I wasn't able to, at least reasonably. I think I could probably brute force my way through it if I really wanted to. But the thing is that the major story content in that game are the main story missions, which are 12 missions, so barely anything, and then the Affinity Quest. The Affinity Quest are really where the majority of the storytelling happens, or the majority of the most relevant storytelling. Anything else like the side quests and stuff, they're definitely stories there, and they're entertaining and fun. The heart-to-hearts, anything that's not really voice acted, they definitely do a lot for world building and kind of fleshing out characters. But the core like story arc for characters are in the Affinity Quests. So I still have Affinity Quests to do, and some of those seem to appear after you finish the main quest line. So I do need to grind up a bit still. So I'm not going to try to brute force it for now. I think I'm just going to kind of grind up. I think I have 10 more levels till I hit the level cap, which is weirdly 60 in Xenoblade Chronicles X. So, I'll probably go to 55, try to bring some other party members up to my level. Cause when you're leveling up relationships in that game, it's switch between characters all the time. So I'd say the highest level, like party member I have outside of my main character is like 43. And the final boss is like level 50. And then if you fail enough, they'll knock it down to 45. Or the final boss that I'm on. I looked at a guide and saw that there are additional boss fights afterwards, which is part of the reason why I'm like, I'm not going to brute force this, because I'm struggling enough on the first 2 encounters, and then there's like 3 more encounters after that. I'm like, let's just do the smart thing, because I have to grind up for these Affinity Quests later anyways. Will I do all the Affinity Quests? I'm not sure. Some of them look a lot more like extra kind of content, and I'm sure they're good and worth doing, but I might just focus on getting the stories for the side characters, the ones that I think really matter, finishing out the story for characters like Gwyn, Murderous, trying to think who I have left. Bose is actually a really weird case where his like mission is like level 37, but the boss in his mission's like level 47, and it's like in a really stupid spot, where it's like a cave full of lava, and you have a tiny platform you can stand on, so all your AI partners just fall off the platform and die, and then you're just kind of stuck there on your own, and you can't bring your mechs in because the room's too small. And so it's just like a lot of really stupid things that kind of, it's like that game, that quest is like enigmatic. Is enigmatic a word? It's fully representative of like all my problems I have with Xenoblade Chronicles X, of just like incorrect information, of being like, well, it's not incorrect. The minimum level to get into that quest line is 37, but there's no way to know the recommended level. No way to know what the boss is going to be. They put the boss in like really stupid like scenarios that, I can see somebody saying, hey, look, this is like a fun little thing to set up, right? But the AI just doesn't know how to deal with that scenario, so it just kills itself immediately. And then also there's just like scenarios where, in this case, it's kind of the reverse, where there's a bunch of smaller, lower level enemies around the boss, which I think that's a bit more reasonable. But then there's other quest lines where it's like, hey, here's a level 40 boss you need to fight, but it's surrounded by level 55 monsters. And it's just like, stuff like that. So anyways, I'll probably do some sort of review that. I don't think it'll be a featured review, but who can say? We'll find out. I'm a little backed up on featured reviews right now, so I don't really want to focus too much on it. But, as much as I complain about Xenoblade Chronicles X, I do love the content of it. I like the story a lot. I enjoy the characters a lot. They're really good. The combat system is deceptively similar to the original Xenoblade Chronicles, but it is not the case. It is very different. It just looks very similar, and kind of the core foundations are the same. I think you could probably, if you've played the Baten Kaitos series, if you played Baten Kaitos 1 and 2, or Origins, it's pretty similar in that regard, where it's like the core foundation of what they're building this game on is the same, but how they implement it is different. And I like that, but I always prefer Monolith Soft working on new IP, so I always prefer them starting from scratch. And Xenoblade Chronicles 2 feels like a game that starts from scratch for the most part, or at least transforms the battle system in such a way that it's hardly recognizable from the first game and Chronicles X as well. I was about to say first 2 games. I don't know if Xenoblade Chronicles X would be considered the same thing per se. I mean, it is definitely built upon that, but it's a very different, unique thing. But yeah, I mean, I think in the end, I do like the game. I just am not good at open world games. And I think this game, weirdly enough, like after thinking about it, like has a lot of the same problems that Xenoblade Chronicles 2 does, but just kind of in different ways of just like the game feels like it's really pushing back against you from moving forward at times. And it's really hard to, as the player, to deal with that at times, or rather it kind of forces you to go look elsewhere. It's like, hey, I know you're in the middle of doing this quest, but now we're going to require you to have this thing, or we're going to put this boss fight in a really stupid spot that's going to require you to be 12 levels above. And it's just going to be, or 12 levels above what the boss actually is because of environmental factors. And it's just like, man, like, give me a break. like at least give me a way to know what I'm getting into when I start a quest, or at least give me a way to quit a quest too, because Xenoblade Chronicles X has a problem where if you start a affinity quest or any kind of quest that's like a main storyline quest, it locks you in, and it locks you under certain conditions. Like you can only have certain party members in your group, or you can only have a certain number of people in your group, depending on where you are in that storyline. So it can put you in some real precarious situations that you can get out of. You know, you can definitely go grind and do other quests and things like that, but it's just not ideal for you know, doing more content if you have to, say, grind 15 levels. It's like grinding 15 levels in that game is not a small task. That means you're going to be dedicating the next, you know, 20, 30 hours. I say, yeah, 20, 30 hours feels about right. But, you know, you can probably, if you focused on grinding really hardcore, you know, you probably could go get that somewhere. But yeah, it's just kind of not a user-friendly game, but the content there is good, and, you know, we'll talk about that, I think, at some point. I think I'm going to try to really limit that to a casual review. I just really don't want to get caught up in having to do a full review of that thing, personally, especially since I've been, like, lingered on it for so long. I feel like I've got kind of a nasty taste in my mouth from it, even though I do like the game. So yeah, I should bring up my podcast notes here so I know what I'm going to be talking about actually outside of Xenoblade Chronicles X. But I mean, that was literally like my entire last 3 days, and I'm kind of glad. I'm exhausted. I'm exhausted, but it's exhausted in, I think, a good way, of just like it was really satisfying. It was something that was for myself. And it's something that I've been trying to get done all last year, and, you know, we're not quite there yet. But I think we're going to be able to get there, and I think I might, for now, really take the time to focus on that, and try to just get that out of the way. Because I think, you know, with awesome games done quick going this week, you know, I got some good background noise for a game like Xenoblade Chronicles X as well. So that might be my focus this week. I know I said I was going to try to pick up making videos again, but if I can get Xenoblade Chronicles X off my plate, I'm going to take that opportunity. So so we'll see. There's not a lot of stuff that I really had to talk about this week, so I kind of pulled together a couple things. One of them was more coincidental. So if you don't know, what we're doing for streaming next week is we're not getting back to Industrial Spy Operation Espionage immediately. I decided to go do some other things, but I or play something else before we get back to it. I was having a hard time figuring out exactly what I wanted to play. I just knew I wanted a longer break from Operation Espionage. So I decided that we're going to play some El Shaddai next week. And when I say El Shaddai, I don't mean the real El Shaddai. I mean this game that you're not going to be able to see, you know, audio-wise, but it's a game called El Shaddai, like D-I-E. And it's a game I picked up at Comiket last year. It's a parody game of El Shaddai. That it's like kind of like a 2D platformer kind of thing. I've been wanting to check it out for a while. I played a little bit of it, I think a year ago or so whenever I got back. I may have streamed it too. I don't remember for sure. But I figured we'd go ahead and play that. And, you know, I got that all set up. And I don't know how long El Shaddai is, so it may not fill a complete stream or not. I don't know. I'm going to guess it won't fill a complete stream just because, you know, it's a Doujin game. Typically, they're short. So I was also poking around some other Doujin games, see if there's anything else that we could play. I don't know if I've decided on what we'll play if we run out of time or if we finish it up, you know, before the stream is over. But one thing I did do is I took out this disc, which is a compilation disc from a group called the X68000 Club. Although it's spelt weird. It's like X680X0. So it's like not. I'm guessing they did that for you know, trademark reasons or something, like they can't actually be called the X68000 Club, which if you don't know, that's like a Japanese PC, retro PC that is very desirable right now within certain groups. I feel like, it's a bit niche, but the games that were on it were very technically impressive at the time. So a lot of people have a lot of interest in that right now, is how I feel, as somebody who does not know anything about the X68000. So I went and put that in, and this is a disc I got either free or fairly cheap. There's a lot of these compilation discs, sometimes from like universities and clubs and things like that, that at least at the Comic Con I went to, where they were giving out. I assume that's standard practice. Usually pay like $1 or $2 for them at most. But it has all their, I don't know about all their works, but it has a lot of their works back to 1999 on there. It's kind of crazy how much stuff is on that disc. And so I was just kind of poking around with it, and I found some interesting games on there. One that stood out to me was Magico, which I guess is technically, or I guess Magico would be Magico would be. It stood out to me because it is a kind of like a gag game. It was something they did as for a like day Unity project kind of thing. You know how they have, I forget what that thing was called in the US, Game Jam or something like that. So they basically built a game in like 24 hours or something like that. And it was basically a gag game where you basically go through like this very simple platformer. And it's the same level like 20 times or something like that. But every time you go into the level, there's like some different modifier. Or most of the time you go into some of them look exactly the same as the original level. I don't really know why, or don't really know if they're different or not. But sometimes you're like ridiculously fast. Sometimes you're ridiculously huge. Other times you're like have a JPEG of a woman pasted on top of your character's face or whatever. It's really goofy. And there's 2 endings. I read the README file, and it seems like they implied there were 2 endings, and I found both of them. And they're a little fun to find. They were not particularly. There wasn't a lot of guidance on finding the endings, but once you found them, it's like, oh, this is like very easy to do. I did a speed run of one of the endings, and it took me 4 seconds from the title screen to the ending screen. But yeah, it was just a cute little thing. It's got a nice aesthetic. And it was good fun. The other thing I played was Magic Fantasy, and this was a simple like 2D action game where you're a little witch and you kind of like shoot little energy balls out. But as you go through the levels, you pick up different elemental spells, and you can kind of cycle between those elemental spells. And each enemy has different weaknesses, or the spell is like made in a way that kind of combats their particular moveset. So one that was probably stood out to me most was the like rock guys. They would like throw rocks and they would roll down the hill. And when you had like 2 or 3 of them at once, it was pretty challenging to get past them because they were rolling rocks all the time. And the game's like you have to press up to jump, and it's very floaty. Like a Doujin game, you don't really expect a lot. It's like a 2D game too. I don't remember if I specified that. But then you feel like you use the ice spell, it like throws this ice cube out in front of you that like slides on surfaces, and it will destroy the rocks as it goes up, and then hit the enemy. So once you have the elemental spell to kind of counteract each enemy, it becomes very easy for the most part. But before that, it's pretty challenging. So it's kind of the satisfying loop of you run into this enemy, and it's kind of a challenging task to get past them. But then once you get the spell, you can just kind of like blast through them. And the level design itself is usually just focused on teaching you how to use a spell. And then you get to the final boss, and the final boss basically has different elemental states that he can be in. You have to use particular spells to attack him with that. And you also get like a supercharged special. So it's like a short game. It's like 10 minutes or something like that long. At least that's what I recall it being. It's very short overall. But I thought it was really fun and had a good amount of variety, and I liked all the like different spells and things like that and how they ask you to use them. I thought that was pretty good. And that's kind of the kind of the challenge with these kind of Doujin games is that like these are kind of fun things to look at and talk about. But, how you talk about them, I think is kind of challenging because, with a stream or compilation video, if somebody ever tried to look one up, it'd probably be difficult for them to find it. But they're not really like, notable or long enough to really create like an individual video about kind of thing typically. So I don't know. Covering these kind of Doujin games is kind of a challenge. And I don't really know what the right answer is for talking about them. So I don't know, maybe someday we'll do some kind of video on one of these discs. There's a lot of stuff on the X68000 Club disc though, so if we did do something like, if we were to like group stuff together and talk about it, I'd probably do it by year and be like, here's the 97 catalog or not 97, 2007 catalog of the X68000 disc or whatever. So yeah, that was a good time. Doujin games are fun. I wish I, spent more time with the ones I have, but I tend to keep pretty busy. But I bought a lot while I was in Japan, probably a lifetime supply of Doujin games. So, but that was the reason I went to Japan. So I'm glad I splurged on it. So. One thing I did look into, and we haven't talked about Foxeye in a long time, but I looked into the Blueport developers because they were going to talk about they were talking about doing a remake of the original Blueport and Blueport J2 or Blueport 2, which if you don't know, Blueport is like a I guess you could call it like a puzzle exploration game where you go underwater and swim around and solve puzzles underwater and stuff. It's a very fun game that has the unfortunate situation of being made by someone who is interested in like I guess whatever fetish you'd call drowning. So it's kind of this weird fascinating thing where it's like they make all their games about drowning, I assume because that's just what they're into. But it also means all their games have this consistent theme and this particular challenge that of when it comes to like error management and things like that, and they make a bunch of games of different genres, so it's really neat, really. And I think only one of the games are 18 plus. I think the rest are all considered all ages, but I do think the sexualization of the characters and stuff like that do shine through. So I think it would be hard to look at it and completely ignore that kind of stuff. So I know that's challenging for some people to get over. But anyways, Blueport J2 is a great game, or Blueport J is a great game either way, and I kind of hope someday I can do something more valuable with that in terms of content, but we'll see. Anyways, but yeah, the Blueport J is actually a prequel to a game called Blueport. That was also a Doujin game, and I haven't gotten around to trying the original Blueport yet. But they talked about doing a remake, and then also potentially releasing an English translation with that remake. And then their blog also talked about a game called Blueport 2, which I don't think they've talked about in a long time. So I don't know what the status of the Blueport series is, if there's going to be anything in the near future. I think it's been 2-3 years since we talked about it last. I think that's the last time they really provided an update. Being a Doujin game developer, I don't expect... I'm sure this is like a hobby of theirs, not their full-time job, right? So I don't really expect a ton. But they have released a couple things since then, but it's really stuff that I'm not really interested in, like illustration collections and things like that. I'm there for the games and stuff. I'm not really there for the art and things like that. So I don't know. Anyways, be curious to see if Foxeye ends up doing anything else in the future. Speaking of future games released, I figured one thing we could do this week is, and I'm sure every other podcast is doing this, is kind of talk about the games that I'm looking forward to in 2021, the games that are coming out in 2021. I could be like, hey, this is what I plan to play in 2021, but both you and me know that's a fool's errand. I will always be like, oh, I plan to play this year, and then 3 years later, I still have not played it. So we'll just talk about the games that are coming out, and I'll give them 3 tags. One is getting that, that means I'm gonna buy it no matter what. 2 is maybe, that means I probably will potentially buy it depending on when it comes out, and what my schedule and finances look like at that time. The last one is the eventually maybe list, which is basically every video game. If you don't know, I love video games, and I will pretty much play any video game you give me, given an unlimited time. I would play every video game released. But my life is not infinite, so you got to make decisions. But the eventually maybe list is just games that I'm like, hey, I would potentially I'm interested in this, but there's probably not a lot of chance that I will actually get around to playing it. But yeah, so to go through this list, it's just some of the things that I picked out specifically. So I left off anything that again would probably be on the eventually maybe list. So maybe this is the eventually maybe plus list, like slightly better chances, but not that much better. So yeah. So the first one is the Medium, which I've talked about before. This is coming out on the Xbox Series X, and I'm gonna guess also on PC. I haven't really looked at the. It's really hard to tell what's exclusive these days. And yeah, it's just kind of a nightmare. But the medium, it just looks really cool. I like the whole like split world concept. It's something that I've seen a few games kind of play with on DSiWare. I've seen a Doujin game do it before as well. And then Metroid Prime kind of does it in Metroid Prime 2, but it's more of like one character going between two worlds, where I like it when both characters exist in the same world or the two worlds at the same time. That's what I personally prefer. It just looks like a neat puzzle game, and I like the aesthetic of it. It looks really, really nice. And I don't know, it just I like that kind of horror game, but I don't like horror games that try too hard, and I feel like the medium does not look like a game that's trying too hard. It just wants to build out a really nice atmosphere for that kind of environment, and it has like a really neat gimmick that I think plays well into the type of game they're doing, but it doesn't feel like they're trying to scare you or anything like that. I think that's my biggest problem with most horror games, is that if they're going to do a jump scare, it is just the most, hey, we're trying to spook you right now moment in games, and I just don't really like that. I like more natural scariness, whether it be from atmosphere and environment. I'll always stand by that. I don't want to say I'll always stand by, but one of the things that always stood out to me was Yuminiki for PC, and just like how I did not want to play that game in the dark, and nothing really that scary happens in Yuminiki. There's like one particular scare I can think of that is somewhat considered a jump scare, maybe. But like, it's just the atmosphere and everything is like, I do not want to turn the lights off while I play this game. It's just really unsettling at times. So I like my horror games to be more like that, I think. And I'm not really a big fan of the dead space. We're going to drop down mangled looking, alien monsters in your face and do it very suddenly. It's part of the reason why I don't like Dead Space very much. I had a lot of challenge with Resident Evil 7 and it doing that. I feel like most of my entertainment out of those things is coming out of understanding how they put it in the environment, and especially if I die, going back and seeing how I can manipulate it to kind of break it. Like in Resident Evil 7, where that lady like comes out from behind the bookcase that you're standing by, and she grabs your arm, but she's not there initially, so you can like walk up to the place where she grabs your arm and see her fly out of the wall and just grab your arm, like in a very like video gamey kind of way, not in like a we intended it to look this way kind of way. So that's what I get most of my entertainment out of jump scares. That, and I pre-identifying just jump scares, like being like, this is where a jump scare is going to be, and then sure enough, that's where it is. Oh, so the medium, that is on the eventually maybe list. It's a good launch window title kind of game that if I had an Xbox Series X, I would definitely pick up. Because it's the launch window, there's not much else I would want. But given that I have no idea when or if I'll get an Xbox Series X, we'll see about that. So we'll put it on the eventually maybe list for now. Super Mario 3D World plus Bowser's Fury. I'm going to put this on the maybe list, particularly because Super Mario 3D World is a game. Those 3D games in general, 3D Land and 3D World, are two games that I've always wanted to get around to trying. 3D World plus Bowser's Fury has online multiplayer. So that's kind of a big thing for me. So if I find, some people that want to play online, then I might give that a go. But I think if I'm just going to pick up a game by myself, I think at this point I'd just pick up 3D Land, just because that's the game I know the least about. But if I can get somebody to jump on board with me with 3D World, I think I'd probably pick that up there. I don't know. There's just something kind of unique about those Mario games that I think was a little harder to appreciate when it came out, when, on the Wii U, when you're looking for that next big Mario title. But now that it's all kind of in hindsight and we have Mario Odyssey and things like that, it's kind of like, these are kind of weird Mario games, and that's kind of cool. It's kind of cool that they're weird. So yeah, I don't know. Someday I'll play either 3D Land or 3D World plus Bowser's Fury. It Takes Two, that's on my getting that list. I just really like A Way Out a lot. Obviously I have to harass somebody into playing it with me, but I really like how A Way Out's mechanics developed, how they kind of, turn the mechanics on its head at the end of the game, even though story-wise you could probably see why it turned that way a mile ahead. But yeah, I like it. I like the dialogue in A Way Out a lot too, and It Takes Two seems to be really, really following that same template in terms of just making these very likable characters. If you don't know, A Way Out's that game where you have the two characters on the same screen at once, no matter what. So it's like split screen, even if you're playing online, so you can always see each other's, what they're doing and things like that. And it plays with how that split screen work to help tell the story or focus the action while the character can still like walk around and things like that. A Way Out's a really neat game. Is it perfect? No, far from. But it's got a good amount of variety, and it feels like a game that really is trying for something, and doesn't feel like just like a. I don't want to say like an EA cash grab, because I think people are maybe a little too hard on EA, but I will say that EA's output in recent years has been very underwhelming for me. Just nothing that they put out is really jumping out. It's something I want to check out, to be honest. So It Takes Two, I'm definitely looking forward to that. Nier Replicant, I'm not going to do the full name. Version 1.22, we're going to leave off those the other numbers. 1.22x, we'll call it. I think that is a getting that. I don't want it to be a getting that, but after Nier Automata, I think at this point it's kind of the same position as Breath of the Wild was for me, where I'm just at the point where I'm like, I need to know if you know what made the original Nier good. Like, I need to know if Yoko Taro made Nier good because he meant to make Nier good. Because, I know it's an unpopular opinion, but Nier Automata, in my opinion, is not very good. Or maybe it's a good game, but it's not interesting. It just does it recycles a lot of ideas from the original Nier, and it relies really, really heavily on the player filling in the holes, for its storytelling. And that's, if you know me, that's something I hate in games. Like, I don't mind having that stuff in games. Like, the original Nier for sure has that stuff. But I need there to be a satisfying story on top of that. And Nier Automata does not really try to do that. Like, you get, the first two endings are really unsatisfying. I know that people be like, well, you're supposed to get to the later endings. I know. But I will always say that the original Nier, if you only get ending A in the original Nier, yes, you're not going to get the full story, but I feel like you got what makes that game special. By the end of that, you don't have to have somebody play ending B, ending C, ending D. If they do, they get a lot out of the game and they learn a lot more about that world, and I would definitely recommend people do that. But if somebody said, I just want to get ending A, I wouldn't say, well, that's a waste of time. Where Nier Automata, I would say ending A, waste of time. Ending B, waste of time. Ending C, I don't even remember what ending C was. Maybe it's a waste of time. The last two endings or whatever, I think it was D and E, if I remember correctly. But the last two endings in Nier Automata are good. But everything else before that's just kind of whatever. Anyways, you know how I am when I get on this Nier track. Anyways, so I want to see what they changed to Nier, and I want to see if they kind of keep the stuff that makes that game special intact, or if they view that stuff as a burden and remove it because they think it's not well implemented. And if a lot of that stuff is removed, I think at that point I could probably reasonably say, okay, they don't understand what I like about the original Nier. I'm gonna guess people are gonna eat that game up either way, but we'll see. They're doing Platinum Games again, or Platinum Games style combat system. I don't remember for sure if they are the lead developer on that project, but I think they are involved in it and driving the direction of how they're doing the combat in that game. So yeah, but unfortunately that's on the getting out of my own personal need to understand what's going through Yoko Taro's mind at the moment. No More Heroes 3, that's on the getting that list. No More Heroes is a series I really like. As much as I complain about Travis and kind of where he is as a character, as also how they handle dialogue, I kind of wish Grasshopper Manufacturer moved on from how they currently do dialogue in their games. I feel like it's kind of outdated, and I think they need to find some new twist to how they handle storytelling. I think the core ideas of No More Heroes are still very good, and I do really like the core gameplay of those games, and I think I like a lot of the characters too. Like even the characters that are not as good as the original No More Heroes characters, I think there's still a lot of charm in them. And I like, they're pretty good at surprising you as a player. Travis Strikes Again, I know is not a game particularly people liked, but that game is one that I always valued the variety and kind of their willingness to present you with something completely different. whether that be like the light cycle things, or the the kind of weird platforming segments in that one jungle area. There's like a very 2D focused area when that game is typically an overhead game. There's also the mansion that you got to explore and find clues in. I think it's called like Coffee and Donuts level or something like that. There's a lot of really interesting ideas in that game, and I expect them to continue to move forward with those ideas, hopefully in the next game. But yeah, I still just need Travis to be a better character. I feel like I just think he's too much, and unfortunately I don't think this is going to be resolved. I think this is just the direction they've put Travis. But I want Travis to be partially a dumbass. I always want him to be kind of a dumbass. But they've kind of made it to the point where he's just too edgy, I guess, is my opinion. Like, I don't know. I've talked about it at length before. I won't go into it again. But anyways, I'm interested in that. Definitely looking forward to checking that out. Monster Hunter Stories 2. I've not played Monster Hunter Stories 1 beyond the first 5 hours. I'm getting Monster Hunter Stories 2. I freaking love Monster Hunter Stories. The only reason I haven't played through it is because it's on 3DS, and I've been in this JRPG hell with Xenoblade Chronicles X, so it's been pushed off, and Final Fantasy 15, which thankfully I've mostly wrapped that up. But yeah, Monster Hunter Stories is a game I love aesthetically. Gameplay wise, it's really neat. It's also just like a really charming game overall in terms of its dialogue and characters, very expressive. And the combat system feels really good, even though it's pretty simple. As somebody who's not a fan of Pokemon and things like that, or at least not anymore, I'm not a huge fan of the monster system in that game, but it's reasonable enough that I've been able to enjoy, at least, like, putting new monsters in my party, learning. Kind of the neat thing is that you kind of have to learn the behavior of those monsters in some ways and see kind of how they're going to handle different encounters, because that will depend on what type of attacks you as the player should do. So it adds this really interesting mechanic to the game. I really hope that they do a Switch port of the original game. They re-released the game on iOS and Android, but it does not have gamepad support, and I'm not really much of a mobile phone player, gamer. I don't know. So I'm gonna kind of maybe wait and see if they do a release of that. Otherwise, it might not be a terrible goal this year to maybe look into starting and beating Monster Hunter Stories. But I'm gonna finish up Xenoblade Chronicles X before I make any real decisions on my JRPG future. so yeah, but definitely getting that no matter what. Even if I haven't even touched Monster Hunter Stories 1 since I originally played it, I just love that game so much. And I love the aesthetic of that mobile game they put out too, and seeing them kind of develop the style a bit more is really good. Scarlet Nexus, that's on the maybe list. I'd say getting close to the eventually maybe list, but the middle maybe list, like maybe I shouldn't have called the middle list maybe. Let's just say the eventually list is the third list, even though we're already almost all the way through this list. But yeah, I'd say maybe for Scarlet Nexus. I like how the game looks, and as somebody who is a fan of God Eater, even though weirdly enough Shift is not working on that game, it reminds me a lot of God Eater in a lot of ways, and I kind of would be interested in having a single player style experience kind of similar to that game. I do think there is multiplayer in the game, but I think it's like something stacked on top of that game. It's not like God Eater where you can just essentially play through the entire game multiplayer. So that's a game I might be able to take time out on my own to just like push through at some point. So yeah, I'm definitely interested in checking that out. It has a nice look, maybe a little generic, but I do like the aesthetics of God Eater in general, and because it reminds me of that, it's kind of caught my eye, and I think it's a Tales Studio game, or at least some people who used to work on the Tales series. And being a new IP, I'm always more interested in that versus like if they made another Tales game or something like that as well. So yeah. PSO2, the new Genesis, eventually list. This is going on the eventually list. I would love to put this on my maybe list. It's free to play, so it doesn't matter if I get it or not. But live games, man, it's just not something that fits into my life at this point. And I really wish I could play PSO2 and commit to it. I had hard enough time getting through Xenoblade Chronicles X, right? And that's like, only 100 hours, something like that. Admittedly, I am basically replaying the entire game because I got through the majority of it in the past before losing my save file. But, I just can't see myself dedicating the time to Phantasy Star Online 2. But New Genesis, I'm glad they're kind of rebooting the game and just kind of giving it a fresh start. That is the kind of thing I want to see out of PSO2 at this point. That's going to get my interest up more. But just like thinking about it realistically, where I'm at with Final Fantasy 14, Final Fantasy 11, PSO2, I have Phantasy Star Portable 2 Infinite and Phantasy Star Nova that I haven't played through yet, even though they're Japanese. So, although I think Phantasy Star Nova might have like a patch. I don't know if it's a full patch though, or just like a menu translation patch. So there are options for me to go for other games like that have a defined ending. Or if it's a live game, I just know if I start playing it, I'm not going to finish it because who knows when it's going to end, right? I guess you could say base PSO2 is ending. So maybe I could say, well, that's now my goal from start to finish episode 1 to episode 6. That seems like a lot of content to push through, though. So I don't know. We'll see. Maybe once I've been relieved of Xenoblade Chronicles X after these last 5 years, I'll feel a lot more willing to jump into a game like that. But I have my doubts. So the eventually list. I would like to play it before I die. This last one's kind of weird for me, but I grew up playing Tony Hawk games. Skatebird. Skatebird looks all right. They've showed it in one of the Nintendo Indie Directs, and it was something that just looked really cute. I like the aesthetics of it. It's just like a skateboarding game where you're a bird. You're a bird on a skateboard. Sure, why not? It is kind of just like an indie game, but it's just like had a nice look to it. I liked how it played, and I don't know. I liked how it played. I've never touched the game. I liked how it looked, how it played. So yeah. Skateboard's on the maybe list. It depends on where I'm at the time. I think it also depends on how long the game is. If it's something I can knock out in an afternoon, maybe I'll give it a go. Give some indie game developers some money. I haven't done that in a while. What's the last indie game I played that isn't a Doujin game? I don't know. That's the end of this podcast this week. I was hoping this would be a shorter podcast, but here I am at the end of this world, another 40-minute podcast. OneControllerPort.com is the website. In terms of what's going up this week, there is no content going up this week. I don't have anything scheduled to post, so it's going to be probably a dry spell for the next couple of weeks, especially as I sit here and focus my time on Xenoblade Chronicles X. I'll do the typical podcast. We'll also do the stream. We're going to be streaming El Shaddai this week. El Shaddai, not El Shaddai. So, if you want to come see some Doujin parody game, I'll be playing a little bit of that. Don't know how long I'll be playing it, but we'll find out. And I'll have something else set up to put some time into as well after that. I don't know if I'll be a Doujin game. The problem with the Doujin game is that PC capture is kind of a pain to switch between on the fly. So I don't know if I'll be able to set something up in a reasonable, it doesn't really matter. I'd be able to set it up, but do I want to go through the headache of doing that midstream? That's a whole other thing. Anyways, and then last week we had all the 2020 stuff that came out. If you're not interested in my thoughts for 2020 or where the website's going, the one I can recommend to you is 3 games that surprised me in 2020. I basically talk about Gunvolt, Luminous Avenger Z, Surprise Magic Pen, and what was the last one that surprised me? Can't remember my own list. Bionic Commando Elite Forces. Those 3 games really stood out to me this year, so I did a little video just kind of sum those 3 games up. Seemed like it got a decent amount of traffic. For the type of video it was, it got a decent amount of traffic. It's not anything crazy. I got a decent number of likes, so I think I'll probably push people towards that video for a while. If you want to know what I'm planning to do in 2021, though, there's a whole video on that where I talk about what we failed to do this year or last year and what I plan to do this year. The big thing is focusing on featured reviews, I think, in the early part of the year, because I've got a backlog of those, and I would like to get those done and pushed out, and we didn't really have that many featured reviews last year. So once Xenoblade Chronicles X is done, I think that's going to really be the focus. I hope. That is my hope, at least. And then, yeah, I guess that's it. If you want to go see us play Super Smash Bros. On stream, that happened last week, so stream's up for that. Otherwise, thanks for coming, and I will see you next week. Bye.